Hello, my name is Protik Mukhopadhyay. I'm an entrepreneur and an author. I'll be hosting the Reimagine Sales Systems podcast, where I'll be bringing some of the industry thought leaders who will be sharing their go to market strategies for their business systems.
All right, guest. Today I'm really glad to welcome Josh Cramoy. He's the Senior Director of Business Ops at Piaggio Fast Forward. And we are really excited to hear about his journey in the business ops world and how he's able to add value in his current role and share his experiences with us. Thank you, Josh, for joining today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Really excited to be here.
So, Josh, can you talk a little bit about your journey into the enterprise world? I know you've worked for really large companies like HubSpot as well as your current role. If you can walk us through, that will be really insightful.
Yeah, absolutely. My experience into tech is maybe a little bit atypical in the sense that I don't have a traditional college degree. I came into the tech world by way of customer technical support. So I was working at a company called Keurig Green Mountain, which makes Keurig coffee and brewers. And was just looking for a bit more of a challenge. I was really into tech, really into computers, had built a bunch of computers, had sort of messed around with coding on the front end, had taught myself HTML, CSS, and was just really looking to sort of turn that into a career. Started studying, doing the self-teaching thing, and ended up in a technical support role at HubSpot. And this was back before HubSpot had IPO'd. They were still a pretty, not small, but 600 people. So I joined their customer support team and then just kept growing my skill set, kept getting more and more interested in the back end of applications and data and system integrations, and was able to really leverage that into a career switch towards marketing operations and more on like the technical side. So helping to build the automation, writing code to support certain automation initiatives on the back end, being sort of the subject matter expert for all things software related when it came to the HubSpot platform, but as well at the time at HubSpot, we were still as well using Salesforce. And then obviously there's a lot of tools in that orbit. It was pretty nebulous. So we're using Looker and Snowflake and Zapier for like some lightweight integration platform as services things. We were using a product at the time called Azuqua, which was also a little bit more of a heavier weight iPaaS. So yeah, that was sort of my foray into that, and ended up being on the business operations team there that handled two pretty large initiatives during my time. One was, as we briefly discussed before we kicked this off, the migration from HubSpot using Salesforce to HubSpot using its own software, HubSpot, which is now what they're fully on today. And so that was a huge job. At the time, they had hundreds of thousands of lines of Apex code powering a lot of that automation and behind the scenes sales operation stuff. So sort of reverse engineering a lot of that code and turning it into functional requirements for the people who are actually building the HubSpot software, in a way that would allow us to, as I said before, eat our own dog food and benefit from all the fantastic things that HubSpot had to offer. So that was a big undertaking. And I was towards the end of my time there, I was presented with an opportunity to come on board Piaggio Fast Forward, who is a robotics company based in Boston. We build a product called Jita Robot, and it is a cargo carrying following robot. It has applications in both the consumer space, where people just want a companion to help them with errands. It's also a bit of a lifestyle product, I would say, for the consumer space. And then we also have clients in the B2B space, some airports, hospitality locations, various vendors like that. And we are a subsidiary of the pretty well-known Italian transportation group, Piaggio Group, who makes Vespa, Moto Guzzi, Aprilia, a number of other 2, 3, and 4-wheel transportation brands in Italy. And so my function here has been, I was brought on board when we were ready to go to market. So we hadn't begun selling yet. They were looking for someone with my skills to come in, stand up the go-to-market systems. That includes the e-commerce platform, that includes CRM, marketing automation and support. That was also the data warehouse, business intelligence tools, and any of the system integrations that power those sort of day-to-day business functions.
Awesome. No, that has been a really great journey.
Yes.
Josh, and
It's been quite a ride. It's been very interesting. So.
Exactly. Especially, I think your experience with HubSpot and now your leadership role in Piaggio is very interesting. Specifically now, a lot of our listeners are kind of looking at quote to cash and RevOps as a strategy, right? Now, I know you mentioned that you're working probably at a broader level on the business strategy, but specifically, what's your kind of company's RevOps quote to cash strategy as you interface with sales, marketing, and other groups? I think it'll be insightful to learn different business models and go-to-market strategies.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'd say there are two main strategies for, I think quote to cash doesn't necessarily apply as much to like the consumer side of the business, but essentially it's automated by way of payouts from our e-commerce platform. So we collect billing, the payment portal is through Shopify, we collect billing through that, and then is paid out to NetSuite by way of Shopify. So there's an integration there. For the B2B side, right now we're leveraging the NetSuite's customer portal. So the quote starts in HubSpot. The customer is, sent a quote, the negotiations happen, contracts get signed. Once the contract gets signed, they're sent a link to a customer portal with their invoice. They pay it out to NetSuite, and the finance team reconciles their books that way. That's really what our current setup looks like.
That's awesome. Kind of taking a little bit deeper dive on that, right? So you mentioned about Shopify APIs and probably NetSuite, but how do you get alignment with the other business stakeholders in kind of these systems? Have you also built some homegrown systems? Like what has been sort of your journey to have everything run smoothly?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Right.
So when we really started getting into the B2B world, we started out with some pilot programs and weren't really billing anyone yet. So it was something that at the time got left, I wouldn't say left behind, but there wasn't a clear plan for us, like how are we going to actually build these customers and collect money from the B2B side? Because we had been so focused on, all right, we've got our e-commerce funnel set up. We've got all of that working, like we're collecting that cash in a relatively easy and painless way for the finance team, but hadn't given a lot of thought into the B2B side. And so, getting alignment there, it's a pretty small team and we work very closely. So my boss is the CFO, and then, I work very closely with like the controller and the finance team there as well. So I would say getting alignment wasn't necessarily so much of a problem. It was more like thinking ahead into something that we just hadn't. We just hadn't thought about it yet because we had been focused on generating revenue through the B2C e-commerce side of the business. So I don't know if that's like a very concise answer, but I wouldn't say there was too much challenge on like getting alignment, saying like, here's the problem, here are the teams involved, here's what we're going to do to solve this. It was just of a sort of like a little bit of a gotcha when it came along, and we were like, oh, okay, so we need to consider that. And we're able to build that pretty quickly using tools that we had in-house. Didn't really have to build any sort of custom solution for that. We had those things baked into our NetSuite account already, and it went pretty smoothly from there.
Awesome, Josh.
And also, I'll say the difference between like where I'm at right now and say working through something like this at HubSpot. I mean, the challenge is very, very different. Like at HubSpot, there's I couldn't even list them all for you, but it's the typical enterprise B2B sales organization. There are maybe 10 different roles within sales that maybe all need a little bit slightly different process when it comes to quote to cash, or it comes to how they're closing these deals. In our position here, we have a pretty small sales team, and so you're talking 2, 3, 4 people as opposed to 2, 3, 4, 500, 600 sales reps, all with different actual business functions. So yeah, I'm having a much more pleasant time this time around.
Interesting, Josh. I think what I got is a lot of your work is focused with the finance and also with the finance leadership. As you said, you're reporting to the CFO. So I think adoption is a lot much related to KPIs. At least, what are some of the key KPIs that, let's say, your leadership and you are tracking, that you're reporting, so that you have complete visibility? Because you also mentioned a little bit of analytics. So can you share a little bit about like what are the typical KPIs that are critical for you or your business that you focus on?
Yeah, I mean, I would say from an internal perspective, adoption is absolutely one. You know, we want to know how much time our users are spending in these platforms, how productive are they being in them, what's the sales activity that's happening inside of those platforms. You know, making sure we're getting buy-in from the key stakeholders. I say that's one of them. But being a smaller organization, again, I don't think that's as much of a huge challenge or KPI for us. You know, we're not struggling to get people to buy in because it's a small team and we're coming in and we're saying, this is how you're going to do it. It's more around enablement for our stakeholders, making sure that the marketing team can execute on campaigns as quickly as they might need to be with any of our tools, and making sure that we are giving them the most up-to-date and reliable data when they're looking at the reporting.
Little bit about your current systems and whether at Piaggio Fast Forward or HubSpot, but like what are some of the systems that you have seen recently that helps you meet your outcomes, right? And whether it is a code to cash system or analytics system, can you share a little bit both? Because I think you have an awesome experience both from an enterprise background and also from a robotics startup that you mentioned.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think one of them is Looker. So I'll mention two that I think have just been very powerful for our business. Looker is our business intelligence tool. And that's really created this sort of like self-service analytics culture here where, you know, we have an analyst that can step in and help you if you need guidance in the system or you need to understand the data points better, or, you know, there's a bit more complex reporting ask, you know, we can deliver that for you. If you give us the requirements, we can build that. But Looker's really created an opportunity for us to get users hands-on with the data, get them curious, get them the training they need to be able to, you know, glean their own insights from that data. And the second, I would say, that's been really transformative for our business has been our iPOS system, Del Boomi. That's really allowed us to deliver very quickly on the integrations front and deliver consistent data across our platforms and get the users the data that they need to see to make the decisions, you know, on a daily basis. We love that it's a no-code. We love that it's a no-code platform. We do have data engineer on our team as well, and he and I both are capable of writing code for integrations. But just having it be a codeless UI seems to allow us to iterate on these things more quickly. It allows us to get a better visual snapshot of what's going on across the board. And it's really cut down on the time it takes us to, you know, move data from one system to another. So that's really been powerful for us in a lot of ways, not just on the sales, marketing, customer support, but also shipping and logistics. We manufacture this product in Boston, and we also, you know, we work with 3PLs to ship it in-house. So being able to deliver that data from our ERP or, you know, HubSpot over to our shipping and logistics team to fulfill in a very short amount of time with a lot of controls in place and you know, a lot of QA opportunities along the way. It's just been so powerful for us.
That's very interesting, Josh. We talked about large transformation at HubSpot. I think one question I had is a lot of our listeners are practitioners. So any lessons learned, right, as you're looking at a large project, like what can you recommend them, and anything specific that comes out that you would want to change if you want to go back in time and do that? I think that'll be interesting.
Great question. So I'll use actually the current where I'm at currently at Piaggio Fast Forward as an example.
Sure.
I mentioned that when I came in, you know, they were really sort of in the natal phase of this. You know, it was very young, and they were trying to bring this product to market and stand up these systems. I think what you run the risk of at a startup, and this is sort of looking back, and I've thought a lot about this just on my own, you know, you run the risk of like making assumptions about what a future state is going to be. And I think you have to. Like at a certain point, you just have to make a decision of how it's going to be in that moment. But I feel that there were things that we automated too quickly where we should have just been patient and said, the real business need is not here yet. Let's take a step back and not try to automate this before there's actually a business process in place. And that was something one of my old bosses at HubSpot would always say, don't automate a bad process. Like don't put the cart before the horse when it comes to, building automation and putting process in place. And so that was something that I think, looking back, I maybe was just eager to get these things all stood up and automated and working perfectly. And really what I should have done is just been a little bit more patient, waited to see what challenges emerged and built around that. And so, I think that was just me not really ever having come into a true startup environment before, where there were so many unknowns.
That's insightful. A couple of final set of questions, Josh. You've been really great to listen to, but COVID, right? That has been interesting impact. Some businesses actually did well, some businesses didn't do. But as you look at 2021, like what are your priorities, and are they also impacted by COVID? If you can share those business perspective, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I think for our team, we managed it pretty well. I mean, we onboarded a couple new hires during COVID, and I'm just speaking to my team specifically. I can get to the overall company in a moment, but I think our biggest desire is just to be back in a physical collaborative space. Our team was very, we'd have quick stand-ups at our desk throughout the day. I'd turn to my analyst or engineer and say, hey, what if we looked at this, or what if we thought about this thing? And it really turned into a very collaborative, fun environment. And I think that's what we're missing the most right now. So, that's not a raw numbers issue we're trying to tackle. That's just sort of a morale and team building thing. But I think we've managed it pretty well. We've managed to turn to virtual events and other ways of trying to maintain that close-knit, sort of intellectual collaboration thing that we had in the office. For our business, I'd say COVID definitely was a bummer in a lot of ways. We had a lot of opportunities that maybe got delayed or changed due to just not being able to physically present a physical product to people. I mean, part of the magic of our product is getting to walk with it, see it, hear it, feel it, be around it. I mean, you really have to sort of use it to glean some of that value from it. And so we've had to get creative with how we present and demo. I think that's probably the case for a lot of companies that are selling any sort of physically manufactured product. You're having to get creative with how you pitch it. And so that was a bummer, but I think really what we found is that we're poised to come out of this in a really good spot. I mean, people are more aware of space and mobility and how they move right now, right? They're worried about public transportation for good reason. They think a lot about the distance between them and another person, whereas maybe you didn't think about that before. And in that way, Jita is really poised to offer a lot of value to folks who are conscious of contactless delivery or mobility within a building or around a space. So I think it's certainly been a negative overall for the world, but we're finding ways to work around it and find a niche and a space for Jita to be in that. So that's been pretty great.
That's really nice. Josh, final question for the podcast. We have a lot of listeners who are early in their career, folks who may come from a technical background or not. How they get to become a director, a senior director? Anything you can share with them? And also, if you're hiring, please share what you're looking for. But what would you advise to someone who's starting their career in sales ops or deal desk or DevOps or business ops?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. I mean, find a mentor, find someone who can really be that voice for you and teach you and that you can learn and absorb from. The other thing is just constantly be learning. Don't get complacent in your role and say, I've mastered this role. There are a million other things out there to know about rev ops, biz ops, sales ops, marketing ops, whatever it is, like there's somebody out there who knows more about it than you do. And so go find that person and pick their brain. And I would say the technical side of this job is very important, but I've worked, some of the best like analysts I've worked with were just people who really got the business aspect of it. I worked with a couple of marketing ops people at HubSpot who were just rock stars at it. Like they didn't have the technical skills I had, but they had just spent so much time understanding the needs of the business and understanding how the business worked, spending that time with your stakeholders. Like do job shadowing. I mean, if you have sales reps and you're trying to understand like what are the daily things that they're struggling with and need enablement around, like go sit with them and talk to them. Don't just look at it from the numbers perspective. That's another mistake too. You know, you can definitely just dig into all the data and tell a story about what needs to happen inside of your organization. But if you're not spending that time to get face time with those stakeholders and understand the needs of your business users, I think you're missing out big time. And then I would say just from like a leadership perspective, understand what your strengths are and understand what your weaknesses are and build your team around those. Like, you know, build your team with people who fill the gaps in your knowledge and are better than you at certain things. And, you know, not everybody does that. That's a hard thing for some people to accept, but I think it's really powerful.
Thank you, Josh. Really good insights. And thank you for joining us today. Awesome.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I hope the listeners enjoyed and found some value in it too.
So with that, I would like to wrap up this podcast. Thank you all for tuning into Reimagine Enterprise Sales Systems. To listen to more exciting podcasts, please visit my website, protikm.com or protikm.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, and other channels that you follow so that you'll never miss your show.